What's up everyone, Garrett here. Welcome back to another video. This is going to be a series and we're going to be going over how to use Django. Before we actually start doing anything with Django, I first want to explain what Django is and why it makes sense for you to use it. Number one, Django is a web development framework built on top of the Python language. So for anyone out there who is new to programming, what does that mean? So Python is a programming language. It's actually one of the most widely used programming languages, and it's extremely versatile. In fact, you can do more or less anything with Python. It's also been used by a lot of really big companies. For example, when they first started out, Google actually used Python to create their search engine and do all of their behind the scenes work on the servers. A lot of other things have been made using Python and actually Django as well, such as Instagram and Pinterest. Just to show you guys what Python is really capable of, or to show you the fact that it's capable of doing a lot of really great things, I want to also demonstrate, or not demonstrate, but I want to also let you know that Python is really big in the data science and machine learning community. It is actually one of the most popular languages within those two communities, other than, of course, the R language. While that won't be what we're talking about in this series, I just think it's cool to know that Python is capable of doing so much, and that by learning Python, you can basically do just about anything you might want. Although this particular series is not going to cover the actual Python programming language, so we're not going to be like teaching you guys how to use Python. We will actually be working a lot with it, and I will be explaining some stuff that is Python specific along the way. So you will, by the time we're done, have a pretty good understanding of the language of Python itself. And I think you'll probably be able to use Python on your own if you so choose to do so. Now let's talk about what Django is. Like I mentioned earlier, Django is a web development framework built on top of Python. What exactly does that mean? Essentially, some extremely smart and kind people have given their time to creating a framework, which we all know what that is, to enable you to easily use the Python language to create websites. What a framework does is basically allows you to kind of plug and play, or basically does a lot of the groundwork for you. You know that saying of don't reinvent the wheel? It basically does a lot of that stuff for you, such as database modeling, controlling the information from the database or your server to the actual end user or their web browser, and things like authentication, which can be pretty tricky to deal with. So Django does a really good job of taking care of a lot of these really tedious and kind of not waste of time, but kind of mundane tasks that you might have to do over and over again. So it does all that stuff for you, and it really makes it extremely easy to just get right down to the fun stuff and building the web app that you are interested in making. There are quite a few websites out there that use Django as well. If you want, you can go look those up, but just to give you an example of one that you could go to right now, my website, EVVEREST, which is my social network for designers, developers, to connect and learn, share from each other, is actually completely built in Django. So it's definitely capable of doing some pretty amazing things, and it's pretty easy to implement and learn once you kind of get the basics understood. If you are not new to programming, then this is going to all make complete sense. You just have to get used to a couple of things and the way that Django does stuff. If you are new to programming, I'm not going to lie, there will be somewhat of a learning curve. At least there was that for me. It was never necessarily a hard thing for me to do, but it was definitely something that I was like, you know, it took some time just for me to get used to how Django does it. But now I feel pretty confident that I can figure out just about whatever comes my way. With that said, I hope that you guys follow along in this series, and I can't wait to show you guys Django. Okay, so before we hop on over to my screen and I start showing you guys what exactly we're going to be doing and start doing some fun things, first we need to take care of what we're actually going to be needing to go through this series. The versions of software, things like that. So let's hop on over and let's first get a new Safari window. So you're going to want to go and look up Python Anaconda and then go to anaconda.org, it should be. Let's go to download Anaconda and let's leave that right where it is. The next thing you're going to want to go to is djangoproject.com and then go to documentation, and make sure down here where you see the documentation version, make sure you're on version 2.0. Version 2.0 just came out, I think, maybe 1 or 2 months ago, so that is the most freshest version you can possibly be learning. And there's not like a lot of differences between 2.0 and the 1 series, but there are definitely some syntax differences, and so some things that you could do in 1 that would work across the board in all the versions of the 1.0 will not work in 2.0. So make sure that you're on 2.0 and just leave that for where it is right now. Next thing, let's go back to the Anaconda website, and depending on what operating system you are on, you're going to want to install the one that fits you. So I would be Mac, and then we are going to be working with version 3.6. I'm pretty sure everything will work with 2.7. However, I have 3.6, so I can't say for sure what will happen if you have 2.7. Generally speaking, I think every computer comes with Python installed, and it probably is the 2.0, series, but doesn't matter. Just go and download 3.6. You can either do the command line installer or the graphical installer, which will basically come up with that window that you just hit next a bunch of times, type in your password, and call it a day, and it'll do everything for you. Totally up to you. There is also somewhere on here, I'm not sure where, but there is also Miniconda. So what is Anaconda? Essentially, Anaconda is a distribution of the Python language. Now, what does that mean? That means that some, again, really smart and nice people put their time into creating, taking the Python language, but adding a few things that they think will help you out in whatever it is you're trying to do. I don't know if this is the most popular distribution, but it was the distribution that I learned on. Don't worry, if you have a different distribution, Django will probably still work. If you don't have enough space on your computer, it is quite a big file at 595 megabytes. So if you don't have space, you can also do Miniconda, which is like a stripped down version with a lot of things not there. There's a lot of stuff within Anaconda that we're not going to use, so just keep that in mind. I've already done that, by the way, so I'm not going to do that. But once you have that, you're going to want to go and check out the Django documentation. Now, by the way, we were here, I believe. No, we hit documentation. And then first steps, you're going to want to go to this where it says from scratch installation. So now we're going to come here and we are going to just sit tight right here because the first thing that we want to do is set up a virtual environment before we actually do anything with Django. Now, what is a virtual environment? Basically, your computer creates an environment for you that you can develop things on. A virtual environment is a simulated environment inside of your computer so that you can kind of play around with, right? So if you do something within this virtual environment, it won't affect the stability or the state of your computer altogether, which basically means that if you mess something up, your computer will still be fine. It'll just be that virtual environment that has an issue. Okay, now before we go on, pip should already be installed. Now, pip is Python's package manager, which basically makes it extremely easy to download other applications that other developers have made and use them within your project or delete them or just see a list of them, do anything you want with them. So it should already be installed if you have Python, I believe, the 3s or something like that. Also, if you went and did the Anaconda install, you should be good, but it'll tell you if you don't have pip, but you should have it. Next thing you want to do is you want to run this. This is pip install virtual env. Now it should tell me that everything is already satisfied because I've already done this and I have. In this video series, we're not going to be going over how to do virtual environments and how to deal with all that stuff because I really want to get to Django and focus on that. But in general, I will link below to an article that does a really good job of explaining how to work with virtual environments, how to create them, delete them, move them, etc. And so you'll be good to go with that. So what I want to do is I want to activate my virtual environment. So if you're on the Mac, you would type in source, activate, and then for me, I've already named a virtual environment called Learn. And basically this is the virtual environment that I'm going to be using to demonstrate how to use Django and whatever other Python stuff we end up learning later down the line. I have a different one for my development stuff where I developed EVVEREST. It's called Dev, but this one's called Learn just if I want to work with new technologies or new versions of stuff. For example, I have Django 2.0 installed in this one. I only have Django 1.11 installed in my development one because that's what I'm developing with. Next thing we want to do is we want to run pip install and then Django. And this will also return that everything has been done because I've already installed it. But for you guys, it's going to run the installation. Let it do its thing until you see this line right here. Obviously, you won't say Garrett Love. It'll say your username, but you know what I mean. The next thing we're going to we're going to try and go into the folder that I have set up for all my Django projects for YouTube, or all my projects in general for YouTube, which is cd/documents/YouTube/YouTube projects/ and then in that folder is where I'm doing all of my YouTube stuff. You guys can do it wherever you want, but that's just where I'm storing everything for YouTube. I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but in this project, we're going to be making a blog. It's going to be not the most advanced blog in the world. I mean, certainly WordPress is a far more advanced blog than we will be building, But in general, it will be a pretty solid blog setup for us to be able to use and work with so we can build an awesome website. And actually, I'll put it this way. The blog that we make, I think I would be totally fine with using as my own personal blogging platform on my website and ditching YouTube. So I think the blog that we make it'll be that good that you'll be comfortable enough to do that. The first thing that we want to do is we want to talk about how Django works in terms of a project. So Django has projects and Django has apps. At first, this might be a little bit confusing, but it's really not. A project is the overall thing that you're working on. An app might cover, this of course depends on how you want to set things up. You can make it with only one app, right? You can make your whole project work with just one app. But generally speaking, an app will cover just one feature within the project that you're working on. So for example, if I have in our blog, we have users, we have posts, we have comments, and for now we'll leave it at that. That's pretty simple. I might make my users one app. And then I might make posts another app, and I might make comments a separate app. The reason you would want to do this is because the whole point is this idea of modularity, which basically means that you should, in theory, be able to just pick up and drop one app into a totally different project and just add some stuff to plug it in, like some little bits of code here and there, and basically allow yourself to have all of those features of that app in that other project as well. And basically, when you're using pip install any thing for Django, any like package for Django, and you'll see this down the line when we actually do this. Basically what you're doing is you're installing someone's app that basically gives your project that functionality that you were hopefully looking for. That might make little to no sense right now. I promise it made little to no sense to me when I was starting to do this last summer, which is 9 or so months ago. But I promise it'll start to make a lot more sense when we actually get there and you see how this actually works. Let's actually create a Django project as well as 2 Django apps that are going to cover our users, posts, and comments. So we're going to do Django-admin and then start project. And we're going to call this project blog. And it's going to run its thing. And if you'll notice, we've actually just created the blog project right here. So this folder was created. We'll go in there because we don't really need to see any of the other stuff. So in here, we've got some stuff that Django automatically created for us. And we're going to go into more on that in a moment, but just bear with me here. Let's just check this out. So now the next thing we want to do is when we want to create some, actually, no, that's a lie. We want to go and cd because we want to go into that directory so that we can make changes to that directory. So now we're going to cd into blog. And what we're going to do is now, there are 2 blog folders. So the project is called blog. So that's this. You get a project folder called blog, but everything is put in an overarching folder called the same thing as your project. So it can be a little tricky at first. Don't make any changes to that. Just leave those folders what they're called. It's the way it's meant to be. Next thing we want to do is we want to run Django admin again, but this time instead of saying start project, we're going to say start app. And we're going to call this app, let's see, we're going to call it users. We'll run that. Look over there, we've got a new users app, so there's that. And then we're going to do it once more, Django-admin start app, and we're going to call this one posts. Now, I'm only going to be making 2 apps because in this project, the posts and the comments are going to be controlled by the same app. You don't have to do it this way, it's just the way that I see fit to do it. Let's take a look inside here, inside of these folders, so we can further examine what exactly was created. Now, first things first, in the actual main project folder, we now have 4 things there. We have a blog folder, which is the same. That's actually like specific files to our overarching project. So that's why it's called the same thing, and that's why that was created. Don't mess around with any of the files. They're all important. Next, we have a manage.py. We'll go into that in a bit. The manage.py file is extremely important because that's kind of how you do your command. That file basically enables you to do certain commands in relation to your project, and you'll see what I mean in maybe a later video or maybe this video. I don't know. We'll see. Inside here we have the initialize or the I think it's called dunder. dunder init, I don't know. We have the init file, which is, it's actually blank. You can open it. There's nothing in there. But you need the init files in every single one of your folders to be able to actually tell Python that it's there. That's how Python knows that that folder or that app or that part of the project is actually there. Now the settings, this actually is really important. This is all the settings of our project. There's a lot of stuff here. Later on, we're going to be adding stuff to it. We're also going to be changing stuff within it. This basically is all of the settings that would go along with your project. So imagine if you have any experience using WordPress, you would go into the settings portion, and you would be able to change the settings that go along with your WordPress website. Same thing. These are the settings that go along with our project site, or with our Django project or our Django website. Next, we have the URLs. This is where we're going to actually determine what all of the URL paths are. So if you're looking at a website and you see, for example, facebook.com/ and then the username, that was determined by this file. Well, not for Facebook because they're doing their own stuff. But if we were to have made Facebook with Django, that would be determined by this file, which basically enables us to say, okay, this is where each one of these URL paths is where you can find a certain feature or a certain bit of information. This wsgi.py, don't worry about that. I'm actually not totally sure what it does. I know it's relevant. I know it's important, but it's there. It does what it's supposed to do. You're not going to have to worry about it. All right, so this URLs, I wanted to come back to this because if you come down into these apps, and we're just going to go through the posts app because every app is the same when it gets created, you can see that we have this init file. Again, we have the admin, which basically allows us to tell Django, tell the admin portion of Django that all of our models, all of our tables in the database exist so that you can access them in the admin section. One thing that's really, really cool about Django that a lot of people love is that if you were to make, let's say, your own website from scratch and you were using, let's say, PHP, just flat PHP, you would have to make an admin section of your website that was basically for you as the owner to be able to log in and make certain changes and edit things. Django does that for you. You don't have to use it. You will, probably, and we certainly will. You don't have to. You could, let's say, make a dashboard for that would do a lot of the same stuff. And, you know, an example of when you would want to do that would be if you had other users on your website, but you didn't want to allow them access to the admin section because it's, I don't know if it's impossible, but I know it's pretty difficult to enable, to set like user permissions within the admin section. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's the same for Django too, but that's what I've heard. So that might be a time when you would want to do that. But overall, Django provides an admin section to your website that you can use to be able to edit certain things in your site. So super awesome, and it makes it really, really helpful. So that's where you would basically add everything so that the admin section can see what's going on. I know a lot of the stuff that I'm going through right now might not make the most sense, but I promise it'll make a lot more sense when we start to go through stuff and you start to be able to see how exactly what I'm talking about fits in and makes sense and how it all works together. The next part of the thing we're going to go over is the app section. Again, don't mess around with it. This basically is just, I think, saying what the name of the app is. This has to do with the configuration of the app. Don't do anything with it. It's there. It does its thing. There's, you know, it's not really important. I'm sure people mess around with it. I'm sure it has a lot of importance to some projects, but to our project, what we're doing, it's not really relevant. Next is the migrations. Now, this folder is something that you will use, but you won't actually go into or touch so much. A migration is when you want to, it's when you've created your data model and you want to actually take that data model and translate it into an actual database of tables, rows, columns, etc. Now, Django allows you to do this without touching any SQL code, which is super, super awesome, and it makes it a lot easier. See, that goes back to why you would want to use a framework as opposed to having to do all this yourself. So you will use that because that's where all of the migrations are stored, but you won't actually be going in there and really editing anything unless you have to delete something, which we'll go into later. Next are the models. This is where all of your data will be. So you're not actually going to put your data in here, but you're going to put in basically every column of your data table that you want to be present and what kind of information should be stored in it. This is where you would put that. So this is where you define your data model, and then you run a migration command, which goes back to that manage.py file that I was talking about earlier. And basically that's how you're able to store user information. Tests, don't worry about it. We're not going to use it. Views. And yeah, views. So views are essentially a way of controlling what data or what information a user can see on every page. Again, you're going to see how that all fits in and makes sense in a later video. But one thing that I really want to explain is MVC, which stands for Model View Controller. This is a development, not theory, but I'm blanking on the word. Philosophy? I can't think of the word. That's not the right word. But this is a development philosophy or a way of developing things that basically has a model. So that's the data model. So for example, that would be this file right here. That's the models. And then you would have a view, which is basically what the user sees. And then you would have a controller. And the controller controls what from the model is displayed on the view. Now, when it comes to Django, it's a little bit different. We have models. That's this file right here. We have a controller, which is actually more like the view. So Django calls it a view, but it acts more as a controller. And then the actual view from MVC would be the templates that we have not gone over, but we will go over in a later video. So really, Django should be called MVT. Django does follow the MVC philosophy, if you will. It just doesn't exactly call it things the same thing, if that makes sense. So just to clear that up, I hope that makes sense. If that confused you, if any of this stuff confused you, make sure that you comment down below. I'll be happy to answer any questions. All right, the next two things that we're going to want to do, and then that'll be it for this video, are we want to create some things. So the first thing that we need to do is within our posts, actually within the project itself, at the project level, we want to create a new folder and call that templates. And that's going to be it for now. The next thing we want to do is create another folder and call this static. And then after this, we want to create another folder and call this media. All right, so once we've done that, now we want to go into, we can leave that. We want to go into posts and open up users. And inside of those, again, you're going to create a new folder, call this templates. And then inside of that, we're going to make another folder and call this posts. And then inside, same thing inside of users, new folder, templates. And then inside of that folder, we're going to call this users, another one. We can close those. That's all we need to do right now. The next thing we want to do is we want to create two files inside of each app. The first file is going to be called urls.py. And the second file is going to be called forms.py. Okay, leave that like so. Now do the same thing inside of users. So what was it? It was urls.py. And then we're going to do forms.py just to make sure that I got both of these right. I did. And for the sake of this video, that's all of the setting up that we need to do. The last thing that I want to show you is actually that we did something. I want to show you that we did something. I want to show you that this Django website actually works and that you could see it in some fashion. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our command line or our terminal or the local shell, whatever you've got going on. You're going to type in python manage.py. Now remember, manage.py was that file that we talked about earlier that allows you to run commands doing things with your project or with your site. So Python tells the terminal that what we're going to do is execute some Python code, and then we're going to execute a certain file. And we're going to do that, and then we're going to type in run server. And this command basically, let's undo that. Forgot to do something pretty important. What we want to do is we want to run our migrations. Now before, and this is what this red text is telling me. It's just saying that you have some migrations that you might want to run. You don't have to do this. It will still work if you don't do this, but there's no reason not to. It's really quickly. So the migrations, we're basically going to be setting up the SQL or the SQL server to be able to recognize and understand that there are two new apps that have been created. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in manage.py migrate. And that migrated everything. It created everything that we need to know. All right, now if we go back and run this run server command, it should run without showing us any warnings. Okay, So what did we just do? We just started up our Django server, which means that we can now go into our browser and see a website, a real live website that we just created. So what this is telling you is that if you go to this link, excuse me, if you go to this link right here, it is going to show what we just did. So go to that, and voila, this is our Django website. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Garrett, this is not what I want. And you are correct, because we didn't actually do anything yet. So it really can't show us anything if there's nothing there to show. But what it is showing us is basically that we did everything we were supposed to do correctly. So congratulations, guys. You've just created your first Django project, your first Django website, and everything is working perfectly. In the next video, we're going to be going and installing some things using pip, which is something that I mentioned earlier, and I'll explain to you guys how that works. And we're also going to be going through the settings and just kind of exploring what's going on there, and basically adding a few things and changing a few things, and just kind of more fully grasping what's going on so that we can continue to go and build our website. And after that video, that's when we're really going to start coding things out. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, if you think you might be interested in this series, smash that subscribe button right down there below. And if you have not, if you're a web developer or a web designer or a developer or designer of any kind, and you want to join the EVVEREST community, it's a social network specifically for web developers and web designers to interact with each other, connect, share what you're working on, ask questions, and just learn and have a good time. Link to that down below in the description as well. So take care, guys, and I hope to see you in the next video.